All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We should be able to start right at 2 o'clock. Let's give some time for everyone to join. Good afternoon, Claire. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, it's right 2 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you once more time for joining us today for another webinar. As you might know already, this webinar is part of our pollution prevention webinar series here at East Carolina University. This series is brought thanks to a federal grant by the Environmental uh, Protection Agency and the pollution prevention program that we have here at ECU allow us to provide not only these educational opportunities, but also technical assistance and other services to the manufacturing sector here at North Carolina, East Carolina, and the rest of the region. So my name is Marley Irby. I am an environmental specialist here at the Center for Sustainable Energy and Environmental Engineering. And today I'm pleased to bring a very interesting talk in PFAS by an engineer from the University of Minnesota, Claire Hartwig. I would like to introduce you to her, but first, let's just show a little bit more about the work that we do here at the center. Next slide, please. So part of the mission that we have here at the center involves serving the industry, but we also are a research institution. We focus on applied research for sustainable and renewable energy. We also work with natural resource conservation and natural-based solutions. We have faculty also involved in supporting industry in a variety of projects. As of course you may know, we also work a lot with pollution prevention, supporting North Carolina manufacturing sector in this area for energy efficiency, water conservation, and waste reduction. Next slide, please. Some of those services, like I said, can involve uh, workshops, technical training courses to support workforce development. We can also offer support for cash flow and market analysis, technical and engineering support, and of course the very well-known energy, water, and lean assessments. If any of you are potentially interested in receiving any of the services, please feel free to reach out to us, to the center. Either me or my colleagues will be able to support you on this to understand better what these assessments are and what is required, as these opportunities are available and not cost for any facility in the state. Next slide, please. So just brief guidelines for today. Um, we are gonna go ahead and start recording this presentation, if not already. Sometimes it comes automatically when we start the session, so it sounds like we are. Um, so after this session, we will be able to share this presentation in our YouTube channel, but you will also receive a copy of the slides via email. And at the end, you'll see also the contact information for today's presenter in case you may have any additional questions regarding this topic. As always, we also have a space for questions at the end, but if you have questions during the session, please feel free to leave them in the chat and we can circle back at the end. And also, we always appreciate your feedback. If there is anything that you would like us to bring for maybe a next session, feel free to let us know that in the chat or send us an email and we can work to find an expert or a very knowledgeable person to talk about that topic in the next session. All right, next slide, please. And so now I'm going to introduce our speaker. Her name is Claire Hartwig Albert. She's an engineer from the Minnesota Technical Assistant Program at the University of Minnesota. And she joined MnTAP in 2025 as an engineer. And her primary focus has been basically reducing PFAS and helping businesses navigate this emerging area. As many might know, that Minnesota is the first in the nation ban coming into effect. So she probably have a lot to share for us. As in North Carolina, we're working very hard into getting better with our monitoring and PFAS reduction in the manufacturing sector. Claire's interest in pollution prevention is particularly on emerging contaminants that she began when she researched the production and fate of microplastics in the natural aquatic environment. Well, she studied also environmental engineering at the University of Minnesota. And so with that, I'll give you the opportunity to present now, Claire. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Marley.
You're very welcome.
So, hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. My name is Claire Hartwig Alberg, and I am an engineer at with the Minnesota Technical Assistance Program, as Marley said. We are a grant and partner-funded technical assistance program within the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. And we specialize in assisting businesses across the state of Minnesota prevent pollution through reduction in energy, water, and chemical use. So today I'm going to be presenting on MnTAP's lessons in PFAS pollution prevention, and that we've learned these lessons over the past few years as we've been working with Minnesota businesses on PFAS source identification and reduction. So before I delve into specifics, I did just want to briefly go over the subjects that I'll be covering during this talk today and give everybody a little bit of a roadmap as to what to expect. So firstly, I'm going to give a little crash course on what MnTAP is and our technical assistance process. I also want to give a little bit of an overview on the PFAS regulatory landscape, which I'm sure many people are already very familiar with, but it does come up quite a few times throughout this presentation. I'll also be providing a bit of context on PFAS regulatory definitions because those also come up quite a bit. And then finally, we'll get more into the nitty-gritty, into the work that we've done here at MnTAP specifically, and the major takeaways we've gotten through our work on this project by talking about PFAS use across the industrial sector, MnTAP's PFAS screening tools, and then I'll go into a little bit of detail on supplier information requests and how facilities can have the highest chance of getting a correct and complete answer when they're inquiring about PFAS in products that they are purchasing and using. And then finally, we're going to wrap it all up by summarizing the major lessons in PFAS pollution prevention we've learned. And then we'll also have time for questions and discussion at the end of the presentation. So first and foremost, I want to introduce you all to MnTAP. I know that I'm reaching more than just a Minnesota audience here, so I want to give everyone sufficient background as to who MnTAP is. So it's important to note that it's MnTAP. Sometimes there's a lot of confusion on our name. So MnTAP, MnTAP. Sometimes people will call us MTAP or MnTAP, but MnTAP. Something that you may not have guessed about us is that we've been around for a very long time. As you can see, we have our celebrating 40 years design seal on this slide here. So we were founded actually in 1984. So that 40th anniversary celebration was now 2 years ago, which is kind of crazy. As I stated before, we're part of the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota. and we're located on the Twin Cities campus. We are located in the McNamara Alumni Building, which is right in near Stadium Village for any of the Gopher sports fans that might be in the audience today. We provide outreach and assistance to businesses across the state of Minnesota, but we've also been able to distribute information nationally through EPA case studies, guidance documents, toolkits, and webinars like this one today. We are a nonprofit organization that is both grant and partner funded. Notably, about half of our funding comes from an operating grant from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, otherwise known as the MPCA. And while a large part of our funding does come from the MPCA, we ourselves are non-regulatory and confidential, part of the reason why we're located at the University of Minnesota and not within the state departments. Our technical assistance mainly consists of two main approaches. The first approach is site assessments that are completed by MnTAP staff. We have a team of engineers and technical staff, as well as some comm staff, but our technical staff is available to go to facilities, make observations, and provide recommendations on pollution prevention opportunities that are identified on those site assessments. And another cool thing about MnTAP is that our site assessment-based technical assistance comes at no cost to the facility that we are assisting. We also have our MnTAP intern program. So each summer we select between 15 and 20 upper level engineering students, science and engineering students to work on projects that are scoped by our MnTAP staff throughout the year as we go to facilities. Host facilities receive an intern that works full time for 3 months in the summertime, and MnTAP handles hiring and payroll. Our intern program does require a cost share contribution that's currently sitting around $4,000, but in my opinion, and I am biased, that's a really great deal for a full-time employee who's very talented and turns out really good work. Another quick fun fact about me is that I am actually a legacy MnTAPper because my dad was in one of MnTAP's first intern cohorts in the 1980s. So that is kind of a fun circular story. So now that you're better acquainted with MnTAP, I do want to delve a bit deeper into the PFAS side of things, which I know is the real reason you're all here. I think it's safe to say that many of the folks in attendance here today are aware that PFAS use is common across the industrial sector. That's kind of a no-duh. But after coming through various PFAS databases and conversing with folks in industry, MnTAP has actually identified a pattern in certain PFAS uses, and we were essentially able to start to differentiate between more universal PFAS uses and PFAS uses that are specific to certain industries or industrial processes. So the more universal PFAS uses typically relate to facility maintenance and include materials such as cleaning products, floor waxes, and roofing materials. There's also a bunch of other kind of more universal uses, but those are big categories. These do represent a large reduction opportunity because they are used quite commonly and their use is typically non-specific enough that finding a PFAS-free alternative may be more feasible in a lot of cases. However, there are also uses of PFAS that are extremely specific and have been tailored to certain industrial processes or operations. And it's worth noting here that our projects here at MnTAP have focused on 3 target industries of metal finishing, food production, and chemical manufacturing. So that's where we've identified those specific uses. The specific uses in these industries included things like chemical intermediates in the chemical manufacturing industry and process aids for coating operations in the metal finishing industry. While alternatives for some of these uses have been developed, in certain cases, the technical specifications and requirements that need to be met for these specific substances can make developing alternatives a lot more challenging in some cases. Of course, one major motivator that we kind of addressed at the beginning for these facilities to be doing this work is upcoming PFAS regulations from both the state and federal levels. So prior to my time here at MnTAP, I actually helped to author some legislative reports on PFAS regulation for the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and I became very familiar with PFAS regulation at the state and federal levels at that time. And regulating chemicals as a class is obviously somewhat new, and it's never been done with a class of chemicals as large as the PFAS class. So it does make sense that there will be some need to make amendments and changes to laws and plans for implementation as they come into effect. But that's also meant that it's been difficult for facilities in some cases to keep track of and understand things as they change or need to be a little bit more fluid at times. The federal PFAS regulations have obviously changed and evolved a lot over the past decade, and the inconsistencies between state PFAS laws, both across state lines, and then also inconsistencies with the federal laws, um, have proven difficult for facilities as they try to identify PFAS in their materials and move to products that are free from intentionally added PFAS. Um, the Minnesota PFAS definition is also extremely broad, and this is not in any way a bad thing, but it also means that facilities may be utilizing a chemical that may not fit the EPA definition of PFAS, but then it does meet the Minnesota definition of a PFAS. Um, and if they're asking their suppliers in a different state, they might just be defaulting to the EPA definition or their own state's definition if they have one. Um, so it can be difficult for facilities to get a straight answer. And a lot of times they may not have a person on staff at their facility to fact check and cross check with the Minnesota definition to actually identify whether the answer from their supplier is complete and correct to the specific Minnesota guidelines for defining PFAS. Um, because I've yapped so much now about the PFAS definitions, I did want to include a bit of context as it relates to the regulatory definitions of PFAS. So these are three quite well-known definitions of PFAS that exist. The top is the US EPA's definition. Then I also listed the OECD's definition, which I know is not technically regulatory, but it has informed regulation. And then finally, the Minnesota definition can be seen at the bottom. And the main thing I want everyone to take away from this is how different these definitions are. Just visually, you can see that. I don't, need everybody to know what a moiety is or understand the organic chemistry notation there, but you can kind of see what we're dealing with in terms of the different definitions that exist. Um, the main thing that I want, you guys, I want you to take away how different they are. We've also found that providing facilities with a template for PFAS information requests because of these different definitions can cut down ambiguity a lot because you can include the relevant regulatory definition on your template. In addition to kind of just trying to assist facilities, MnTAP also conducted a lot of informational interviews as part of this project to try and understand the industrial response to PFAS regulation. One of our major takeaways was that these responses varied greatly from user to user and from industry to industry. For example, some industries, such as domestic food packaging, appear to have eliminated PFAS in their products for years and kind of preempted the regulations that now exist at the federal level, whereas other industries appear to still be in the phase of PFAS source identification. One consistency that we noticed was that for users and in industries that did fall into this kind of proactive category that has preempted the regulation, the major motivation was customer demand more than anything. So customers were making inquiries and requesting that products be free of intentionally added PFAS, and that drove innovation and implementation of fluorine-free chemistries as alternatives to the historical PFAS uses that existed within those industries. Supply chain transparency, and then also being able to get direct answers from vendors also seemed to be an imperative thing when it came to being able to source materials free from intentionally added PFAS. Another thing that was noted was in-house development of alternatives. Also, obviously, streamlines the process of PFAS replacement a lot. But it was also clear that that is not an option for the majority of PFAS users because most facilities just don't have the staffing and infrastructure to do in-house development. The ultimate takeaway from this was that different facilities will require different levels of assistance, and it might be advantageous for technical assistance providers or regulators to target outreach and technical assistance towards industries that are still earlier on in their PFAS P2 journey. It's worth noting, though, that industries that have already successfully moved away from PFAS can still be an excellent source of information, as well as success stories from these industries, and they can serve as both a little bit of a how-to to give facilities specific next steps for identifying PFAS-free alternatives, but also as an inspiration for facilities that are still trying to figure out what PFAS source reduction looks like for them. I think it's really disheartening for a lot of folks as they're trying to move away from PFAS, but to show that other industries or other facilities are successfully making this happen is can be really helpful. Through informational interviews, we also learned a lot of lessons about specific challenges that facilities are facing when it comes to PFAS source identification. So one thing that stood out to us was that safety data sheets, or SDSs, which many companies are instructed to consult for PFAS screening purposes by various people. Suppliers will say to consult them, regulators will sometimes say to consult them. Those often do not include PFAS because there is insufficient hazard data for the vast majority of PFAS. I think a lot of folks working on PFAS reduction are aware that there's a need for more research regarding the environmental and health hazards of PFAS. But the lack of inclusion of PFAS on an SDS is something that I personally had not previously considered as a side effect of that knowledge deficiency. Some facilities have also pursued testing to determine whether their products or processes utilize PFAS. But due to how ubiquitous PFAS is, we all know it's very ubiquitous, it is difficult to interpret PFAS test results sometimes and differentiate between PFAS contamination and intentionally added PFAS. Ultimately, this has led to the conclusion that well-constructed information requests to suppliers are really the most reliable way for facilities to determine if their raw materials contain PFAS when they are unsure. Our information request template was something that we developed relatively early on in our project because we identified that it could help facilities get more correct and complete answers from their suppliers. And the biggest takeaway from what we've experienced with information requests is that the request template should definitely include the relevant regulatory PFAS definition that facilities need to adhere to. So our template includes the Minnesota definition. If other folks would like to make a template, it should include the most relevant regulatory definition. Furthermore, on the supplier letter template, I did just want to show on this slide here where on our MnTAP PFAS webpage, our supplier letter template is linked. And then I took a screenshot of the supplier letter template itself. It's just a Word document. It's a pretty elegant solution. It's not overly complicated, but it can cut down on that ambiguity a lot. You can see it has highlighted sections that the person filling out the request can change and personalize to their specific company and the company they're requesting information from. We also, again, as I said, have the Minnesota regulatory definition of PFAS stated clearly in the information request, but that can obviously be swapped out for any other relevant regulatory definition. The second page of this template I didn't show because it's rather boring, but it includes a table that the suppliers can fill out. So either they could fill it out online as a PDF or they can print it out. And then they can provide the company that is requesting the information a list of the relevant PFAS that they are inquiring about, if there are any. Another nice thing about that table is you could customize it. For instance, in Minnesota statute, there's certain things that need to be reported, so they could put columns for all of the details that they need to report to make sure they're getting all the relevant information they need. Another thing that we learned from past few years of asking people about PFAS, and I learned before in my career too, working in PFAS, is that PFAS is a bit like Fight Club in that the most important rule regarding PFAS is that people aren't supposed to talk about PFAS. So another important technical assistance gap that MnTAP has worked to fill was to provide facilities tools and resources that they could perform their own PFAS source identification in the cases that they didn't feel comfortable discussing PFAS with MnTAP staff. Obviously, gold standard would be to have staff on site and looking at things, but having a self-service tool available is better than just trusting the SDSs from what we've seen. I do also want to remind everyone here that MnTAP is no cost, non-regulatory, and confidential. So for people to be wary to even talk to us, I think it means that having these self-service resources available for industrial facilities is really important and imperative. Without resources like this, facilities will likely just go off of what their supplier tells them. And to help address this technical assistance gap, we put together a variety of screening tools for folks in the industry and municipal wastewater treatment plants to utilize. I'll note too that all these resources are linked on the MnTAP PFAS webpage. And these tools include things like our customized ChemSec list tool, our PFAS source identification form, and our PFAS assessment guides for those three target industries of chemical manufacturing, food processing, and metal finishing. To give a little additional information on those tools, I did kind of highlight some. So this is our customized ChemSec list tool. I wanted to show a screenshot just to give everyone an idea of what the user interface looks like. Our customized ChemSec list tool is essentially just a filterable spreadsheet, and it's more specific and interaction, or a more specific and interactive version of ChemSec's PFAS guide, which I will say is also an excellent resource in and of itself. We've also created these PFAS assessment guides for, again, the three target industries of metal finishing, chemical manufacturing, and food processing. These assessment guides are documents that include source identification strategies and resources, information on PFAS use within the specific industry that they are about, and then definitions of PFAS, and finally a list of PFAS that was compiled from multiple sources that are used within the target industries and the purposes for which they are used in those target industries. And in addition to MnTAP screening tools, we also have linked on our website other helpful screening tools that were developed by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, including the MPCA's desktop screening tool and their desktop audit tool. Our PFAS webpage also has some general PFAS information on historical uses and health effects, and a section specific to wastewater treatment plants, and a section specific to industrial PFAS users. Obviously, from this presentation, we know that PFAS pollution prevention is a burgeoning field and topic on the regulatory scene. As treatment cost estimates continue to climb, it's clear that pollution prevention is the most impactful and feasible way for us to reduce PFAS concentrations, both in ourselves and the environment. While research and testing has shown that there are many non-point sources of PFAS, point source PFAS reduction is an excellent place to start making big differences on the PFAS pollution prevention scene. MnTAP has learned a lot about PFAS pollution prevention over the span of our work, and I'd be lying if I said that this project has gone swimmingly and we didn't encounter any hiccups as we tried to help facilities around the state identify and reduce PFAS use. But after working in PFAS remediation early in my career and then regulation when I was at the state, I can safely say that when it comes to PFAS, there is no plan that will go off without a hitch. I don't think I've had anything go according to plan as I've been working on PFAS. But I also think that we did learn some extremely valuable lessons from the conversations and help that we were able to give. Even if facilities were not necessarily comfortable being totally open with us regarding such a sensitive topic as PFAS, this unique non-regulatory role that MnTAP plays did allow us to have some informative and candid conversations about what is working in regards to PFAS regulation and what still may need some tweaking as things are implemented. I've also listed some major takeaways that we've learned here. So obviously, as I said, PFAS pollution prevention is still developing. The definitions are technically complex, and not every facility will have staffing to interpret those definitions. Alternatives are difficult to find and implement in some cases. Like I said, in some cases, they've already been developed and implemented, but there are a lot of people where that is, or facilities where that is the barrier. And again, as I had said previously, select industries have had shifts that force suppliers to reformulate, and so they've already implemented these things. We also identified some of the barriers to industrial PFAS reduction. Those included things like high upfront costs, which can be prohibitive to smaller facilities in particular. Complex regulation and supply chains make it really difficult for facilities to even start identifying the sources of PFAS within their operations. And then incorrect or incomplete answers from suppliers could convince facilities that they don't have PFAS when maybe they in fact do. Um, and then finally, on an upswing, on an up note, technical assistance providers can help with PFAS P2. Obviously, the main thing we do is providing technical support and helping facilities that maybe don't have the appropriate staffing to identify and reduce sources of PFAS within operations. But I think another important role is we can serve as a go-between between industry and regulators and kind of point out the bottlenecks and see what we can do about them. We can also develop recommendations that can be applied more broadly. That's one major goal. Obviously, we're trying to assist the facility we're working with, but if we can develop a recommendation that can be applied more broadly to the rest of the industry and reduce pollution more broadly, that's something that we obviously want to do at MnTAP as well. MnTAP is here to assist facilities in Minnesota and do better in regards to PFAS use, but we also want to make sure that the lessons we learn are available to everyone. I'm really hoping that this presentation has been informative, and I'm going to open it up to questions and discussion on the next slide here, but I also wanted to point out that the next slide has my email address on it. So if you have any questions about our PFAS pollution prevention experience or questions about the resources and tools we've created for PFAS pollution prevention, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to talk more about it. And then that's it. So now we can open it up to questions.
Thank you very much, Claire. Now
Thank
we have a
you.
space for questions. I think there might be some questions already here, so let me check. Hold on, it's loading. Okay, I see one question. Please put supplier notification link. I shared one link. Claire, you can double check if that's the correct one for
Okay.
them to
Yes, I
check those
think
resources.
there might be one on the slide too, and if not, I can make sure I add one, Marley.
Can you give us an example of what MnTAP did within a specific industry?
Um, well, the thing about MnTAP is we are like confidential, so we do have to be a little bit careful. I'm trying to see if my director, Kelsey, is on. Mainly, we were supporting by providing additional information through resources for, outreach and connecting with suppliers. We also worked with, like I said, folks in the target industries or reached out to folks in the target industries to get uh, information from them. I will say, like, a lot of people that we assisted were still in the PFAS source identification um, side of things. So we don't really have a lot of like specific examples that one we're able to give or two we have to give.
Okay, is there any other question? Let me double check here in the chat for Claire. Does MnTAP have medical devices, medical instruments as an upcoming target industry? Many devices rely on PFAS materials.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I know in Minnesota statute, I believe they fall under an exempted category for the Amara's law for the PFAS ban. But we do work with within the medical industry. We've done a lot of pollution prevention assistance. So if medical suppliers or facilities are interested in PFAS source reduction, that's definitely something that we have capacity to help out for. But in Minnesota, as I said, that category, product category, is exempted.
Okay, let me check one more time here. I see another question. Okay. How many companies have asked for PFAS assistance, ballpark, in a given year? How many MnTAP staff are involved?
So our PFAS team is I would say tiny but mighty. Right now there's four of us on our PFAS team. Um, we don't get a ton of like unsolicited requests for PFAS assistance. It's more we do more on the outreach side of things, I would say, contacting people based on, NAICS codes or whatnot, and seeing if they would like assistance for identifying and reducing PFAS use at facilities. I would say that's where we've made the most progress, as again, I think a lot of facilities and folks are afraid to talk about PFAS because there can be so much, um, heaviness and potential liability associated with PFAS use. But I would say the outreach side of things has been much more successful.
Thanks for that. I see another question. Is the best fit for the pharma industry chemical manufacturing or healthcare in your tools and the ChemSec guide?
That's a good question. Um, so pharmaceuticals, what were the two options?
The pharma industry, chemical manufacturing, or healthcare in your tools and the ChemSec guide?
For so I would say chemical manufacturing probably has the best relevance for pharmaceuticals. And then again, for Minnesota specifically, the pharmaceutical industry is exempt from Amara's law for the PFAS ban. Last time I checked. Um, so that would be one where we haven't worked very deeply on that in Minnesota. But I would say um, in terms of like uses and identifying where they're used, it would be within chemical manufacturing more than medical devices.
Thank you for that. How do you approach businesses? Cold call, email, and set up an appointment to come around, start with a phone call, etc.
That's a good question. It kind of varies. Sometimes we approach businesses, uh, you know, sometimes we'll go and present at different events and, provide our cards to folks. Sometimes it is just cold calling or cold emailing. I would say that's probably the majority of our outreach when we have, a contact we can find, leveraging our network. We also talk to a lot of wastewater treatment plants, and sometimes they'll reach out to facilities for us on behalf of us and see if anyone has interest in speaking with us. So it's kind of varied, and it depends on the type of project we're working on. But those are the main avenues, I would say.
Do business ever approach you for technical assistance?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Like I said, I think most of the time it's us outreaching, but there are, we've been around for a long time in Minnesota. So people do know about us and we do get unsolicited requests of folks just wondering if we can assist.
Thank you for that. Let's see. I don't see any other questions. Let me check the other chat. Okay. No other questions just yet. So for manufacturing facilities that maybe haven't started evaluating their PFAS, if any, what do you think they should be starting to do? Like maybe three things that
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they should start with this.
That's a good question. I think I hit it hard a little bit with within the presentation, but I do think contacting suppliers and providing them the relevant PFAS regulatory definition that your facility, needs to adhere to. I think that is like a really great first step. And sometimes there's some back and forth, or it takes suppliers a little while to get back to you. So that is like a great one to kind of be proactive about. I do think you can reference SDSs and see if there's anything that pops out from safety data sheets um, that, could be helpful. But again, it's not exhaustive, and a lot of times PFAS are left off of those. Um, and then, seeking out technical assistance from providers like us or utilizing a desktop screening tool. So, anyone can use the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's desktop screening tool. That could be a good one, or consulting sources like the ChemSec PFAS guide or 0PM. Um, those are really great resources to kind of do a desktop. So maybe threefold, um, kind of hands-on looking at SDSs within the facility, um, looking at the ChemSec list guide or a similar resource to kind of acquaint yourself with uses of PFAS within the industry you're in, and then reaching out to that supplier. Uh,
I see some comments here. But one question is, can you recommend a good training on PFAS for people in the EHS sustainability field?
Um, that one I'm not sure of. I can look into that and maybe connect with this person if they want to email me. I can look more into that and see. I don't know if there are a lot of them. I'm going to be so honest, which is
Mm-hmm.
frustrating. But I can see if there are any that would be appropriate. Um, it's kind of what the crux of the issue with facilities that have a small staff when their EH&S like manager or whomever at the plant is doing a million other things. It's hard to get someone who knows a lot about PFAS sometimes. And I see a comment too that SDSs are horrible resources for finding PFAS. Yes, I agree. um, but they can serve as like a good preliminary screening tool as long as people are aware, like that you can maybe catch a few, but people should be aware that they are not exhaustive. And just because you don't have PFAS on your SDSs doesn't mean you don't have PFAS kind of thing.
To what
Uh,
percentage within a material is a supplier responsible for identifying PFAS?
so that is um, that was either within statute or rulemaking that the Pollution Control Agency has done. So their website would be a good resource for that. And then I can again maybe connect with that person and send them. They have a PFAS reporting webpage, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency does, that has a lot of details. Um, I I want to say there was no de minimis condition simply because, they've found that such low concentrations of PFAS can be health hazardous. So a lot of times, new laws don't necessarily have a de minimis condition for reporting, but don't quote me on that. I would need to consult yes, okay. Thank you, Erin. Yeah, I need to consult the website. But yes.
Let's see if I have another question here in the Q&A chat. Okay, yeah, there's one question or a few questions here. Does your PFAS technical assistance cover both wastewater and air emissions, or do you provide assistance only for wastewater?
So we actually only provide assistance for like pollution prevention, and that can mean um, preventing things from getting into the wastewater stream or the air emission side of things. Um, once it like the only thing that MnTAP doesn't deal in is remediation. Like we won't deal with contaminant cleanup. That's not within our purview. Our purview is essentially trying to stop the use of the chemical first and foremost, but then also better handle um, how it's disposed of.
Another question. Ooh, I see several questions here. Hold on, let me
No worries.
see. Let me see if I did not read anything. Okay. Did I or did you mention wastewater facilities in your presentation? What type of assistance do you provide for such facilities, for wastewater
Yeah.
facilities?
So for this project, and yes, I also saw. Okay, sorry, I'm getting distracted. I'll answer one question at a time. Yeah, we've done some PFAS source identification assistance for wastewater facilities and some GIS mapping for facilities as well. And we have that more detailed on our PFAS webpage on the MnTAP website. So that's an excellent resource if you want to look more into that. We've also provided some outreach materials like flyers to wastewater treatment plants that they can send out to their customers if they are suspecting folks of using PFAS, or if they have high PFAS concentrations in their wastewater, in their effluent, then um, you know, that can be a good resource for them to just make facilities aware that we're here and we're happy to help, at least in the state of Minnesota.
Another question. Have you run across the use of PFAS in beverage can linings? Have you come across any uses of PFAS that have surprised you?
I think something that was surprising was the amount of like universal PFAS uses within like facility maintenance contexts. So as I was mentioning, like floor waxes and cleaners, as as is pretty well known, PFAS is a surfactant or can be used as a surfactant. So, cleaners can include them. Um, those were kind of surprising in that, I think we were kind of looking for a smoking gun sometimes in terms of like one very specific use in a facility, like for a specific purpose, but to have those kind of more broad case um, uses, uh, I guess it wasn't necessarily surprising because we see, publications about PFAS in like personal care products and stuff, but it was something that I hadn't really thought of when I was more looking at it from the industrial side of things.
Thank
And
you
I
for
haven't
that.
heard about use in can liners. I know there is, I think it's the FDA requires no like PFAS in food and beverage containers, I'm quite sure, but that is like a domestic manufacturing. So, those containers that are manufactured within the United States, I believe.
And that we answered this already, but does your PFAS technical assistance cover both wastewater and air emissions, or do you provide assistance only for wastewater?
We can cover both. And again, it's not really like the emissions once they leave the facility that we're focusing on. We're more focusing on what's going on within the facility, I would say. We operate on that. If anybody's seen the like inverted pollution prevention pyramid, where like the top one is the biggest section, and that's like pollution prevention. So reducing the use, replacing it with something less hazardous, those sorts of things are what we prioritize.
Another question. So, are you aware of any rumors or plans for ISO to incorporate PFAS into their management systems, such as ISO 14001?
I'm not aware. Unfortunately, that's not a great answer, but I'm not aware.
I haven't heard that either, but who knows, right?
Mhm.
Um, some people share some training
Yes, I saw
resources.
someone listed Anhisa. I've heard of them before. Um, that could potentially be. I've, had interactions with Anhisa before. I can't endorse any certain thing, but I have seen that.
Thank you for that. All right, I don't see any other question. We had some time. If there's anyone that still feel like we haven't covered anything or still curious to get an additional insight regarding this topic, feel free to either put it in the chat or raise your hand. Otherwise, we will be kind of wrapping up, Claire. Unless you want to share something else for us here in North Carolina. Well, and across the country. We have audience across the country, to be
Yeah, that's
honest.
awesome. I'm excited to be talking to everyone. Obviously,
Yes.
MnTAP's technical assistance focuses on within the state of Minnesota, so it's great to be reaching a broader audience and talking to folks. I would say, feel free to contact me with an email if anything comes up based on what I've said, and Marley will be sending out our slides. I'll ensure that all the relevant links are on those slides, like to the supplier letter template and such. Um,
All
but
right.
yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, I don't see more questions. Um, so we're gonna just wrap up this session. We'll give almost a little bit more than 10 minutes back of everyone's time.
I talked fast, I guess.
Yeah, okay, please let's share next
Oh
slide.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have just, I think, one extra event for next month for those that might be interested in learning about grid edge energy options. We're going to have a guest speaker, founder and owner from an energy consulting company. You will receive a link for registration alongside the PowerPoint presentations that Claire shared today. And so, yeah, have everyone a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us today and follow us on social media or LinkedIn to stay in touch with us and learn about our next events. Thank you all. Have a
Thanks,
great day.
Right.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye
Yep.
bye.
Bye, everyone.